Welcome to the City. I'm Anthony Wilson, the Public Information Officer for the City of San Angelo. And joining us for our first segment today is Shannon McMillan. Shannon is the Stormwater Program Manager for the City. Shannon, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Now tell us what the Stormwater Program Manager does.
Well, we're tasked with following the requirements in our federal and state mandated stormwater quality permits. And a portion of that is just ensuring that our stormwater runoff is as clean as it possibly can, because it does directly go into our lakes and rivers.
Talk a little bit more about that. Why is managing stormwater necessary, not just from a standpoint of meeting state and federal mandates, but also to ensure a higher quality of water coming out of our taps?
Right. And stormwater quality is important not only for drinking water, but for recreational use, for aquatic life, for bacteria, microorganisms, fish, plants, animals. Water quality needs to be at its best for those things to thrive, which in turn makes our drinking water quality much better, because we have to treat less because we have less contaminants.
So in other words, whatever flows into our lakes and rivers then eventually comes out of our taps.
Absolutely, it does.
So the city, as you mentioned, has a stormwater management plan. Talk a little bit about what that consists of.
Our stormwater management plan addresses 6 minimum control measures that include public education and outreach, illicit discharge, which is basically illegal dumping, construction and post-construction inspections, and then industrial facilities, just if once we reach the 100,000 mark for our community.
And so your job is to ensure that we're meeting all of those benchmarks within that plan.
Right. We develop a stormwater management plan, and so the cities are allowed to develop their own plan, but whatever they put in that plan, they're required to follow. And so my job is to ensure that we're following what we've put in place to improve stormwater quality and meet the requirements that are set by federal and state regulation.
Now, our water customers may have noted that in their monthly bill, they have a stormwater fee as part of that bill. How much does the typical San Angelo homeowner pay in stormwater fees each month? Over
half of the residents in the city of San Angelo pay the $3 fee a month, which is pretty minimal. And the higher square footage of your home, the higher that rate is. The highest it goes to is $5.
So how is the fee determined both for residential and for commercial property owners?
That fee is determined by square footage of the home for residential properties, and it's determined by impervious surfaces displaced by commercial properties.
So when you talk about an impervious surface, what would be examples of some of those?
Concrete, parking lots, any kind of area where the water that lands on it cannot soak through that surface.
So roofs would be an impervious
Roofs are another one
surface
as well. Yes,
so
sir.
How is the amount of impervious surface related to stormwater?
Well, it's related in a couple of ways. When you have a surface that doesn't absorb anything, it tends to hold that. So contaminants, oil from your car, or any kind of antifreeze, fertilizers that get on concrete, those all stay on that surface. So when it rains, that washes it out and it washes into our curb and gutter, and so it essentially increases pollution. So our main goal is to increase permeable surfaces so that water and the soil can retain that water, and those contaminants can actually be retained in the soil in which plants use them to grow.
So you've talked a lot about the stormwater fee addressing quality issues, water quality issues. Does it also address the stormwater fee, the amount of stormwater that, in other words, how we control it, how we sort of minimize so we don't have flooding in our community?
As of right now, the stormwater fees are only for quality, and that's because those types of things tend to be costly. An adverse impact or a good impact of having those regulations to increase permeable surfaces does have an impact on water velocity and quantity, but our main goal for the stormwater fee and for this entire program is to address quality issues.
And so tell us how the fee is used in that regard.
The fee is used to fund public education and outreach materials, programs with the schools, programs with the public, civic events, things like that. We also do street sweeping and maintenance, so our operations department does drain cleanings to make sure that we get all the sediment and other contaminants that are in the drains. We sweep streets, and we also do other kind of maintenance activities as far as water quality ponds, gabion dams, things like that serve a purpose in filtering out contaminants in rainwater.
So when you go out and you sample and you analyze stormwater, what sorts of things are you looking for?
We're looking for lots of different things. Two of the major ones that we sample for are biochemical oxygen demand and total suspended solids. And those things basically tell us the health of the water. And so once we see what our levels are in that, we can kind of determine what contaminants are contributing to those levels being not meeting the standards. And then we can usually trace back to where those contaminants may be coming from, whether it be from the city or from something that it's out of our control. Because a lot of things are environmental and weather related, temperature related.
So tell us though, if you saw an unusually high level of total dissolved solids within a sample, how do you go about addressing or correcting that so that you try to lower that back down to the standards under the law?
Well, we regulate, we test for suspended solids, and that is basically contaminants that are floatables that can be filtered out through that water, and that lets us know main floatables are usually sediment. So that lets us know that there's some construction activity going on, that we need to figure out where it's coming from and make sure that they have some erosion control methods in place. And if it's coming from the city's maintained things, then we will go and try and address that by planting seed there or something like that to reduce the sediment getting into the river.
So you mentioned earlier river cleanups. Why are those important?
Those are important not only for water quality. You've got all sorts of wildlife out there that are negatively impacted by trash in the river. Not only that, but you have aesthetics that need to be maintained in order for the citizens to be able to enjoy our river and clean it up. But ultimately, it relates back to water quality and the health of the water.
And you mentioned street sweeping. Talk a little bit about how that helps.
The street sweeping program is really, really beneficial for sediment, which is the majority of our issues in the river. And what that does is environmental conditions such as wind and rain and things like that, where debris and stuff gets in the curb and gutter, they're able to go through town and sweep that debris up and dispose of it properly prior to it getting into the Concho River.
So can I assume this means that folks who are doing lawn work should not blow or sweep their clippings or their leaves into the street?
Absolutely. The street sweeping is for naturally occurring things, not for citizens to blow their grass clippings and call the department and have them come pick those up. That's for naturally occurring things, and we encourage everyone to keep it on their lawn, compost it, utilize the really beneficial nutrients that you have in those yard clippings and your leaves for your yard, or bag them up and dispose of them properly.
You mentioned maintaining vegetation. Talk a little bit about the activities related to that and why that's important.
Well, earlier I discussed the permeable surfaces and how beneficial that is to stormwater quality. And the reason it works is that it takes all those nutrients that are contaminants in drinking water and our river, takes those nutrients, those excess nutrients, and it holds them in the soil. And it utilizes that for plant growth. And so that actually acts as a natural filtration system for the water to be cleaned out prior to it getting to the river. So it's not only important for water velocity and quantity because you're adding something that's soaking up that water, but it also has a wonderful effect for water quality.
And you mentioned about construction sites. So I know that we have inspectors who go out and inspect construction sites both during and then after the project. What are they typically looking for?
They're looking to make sure that everything on the site is essentially contained. So, you can have a displaced soil and everything like that, but once it enters the city's MS4 system, which is our regulated portion of the permit, once it enters the curb and gutter, it becomes our responsibility. And so the main impact that construction activity has is sediment displacement. So we're trying to ensure that they have erosion control measures around their site to lessen sediment from leaving the site, as well as pollution prevention. If they're utilizing certain chemicals, paint thinners, stuff like that, we want to make sure that their site is clean and that they're not letting any of those contaminants leave the site.
And so that's why you typically see those really low fences around construction sites, I guess, is to keep that sediment from leaving the site.
Absolutely. The silt fences are perfect use for that, and when installed properly, they work very well.
How successful have the stormwater quality efforts been in San Angelo?
Well, within the past 12 years, significant changes have been made in San Angelo. A portion of the Concho River that had the bank restabilization, that was a benefit to stormwater. That was funded by EPA and TCEQ with the help of UCRA and the city of San Angelo to get that taken care of. And that mainly addressed sediment. We have not had a fish kill in over 10 years, and that's something that you can, get assessed a lot of fines for if that occurs. So the small, simple strides that we're making in educating the public and enforcing upon not only contractors in the public sector, or the private sector, but even the public sector, those things have attributed to the quality of water being better, which has ultimately led to one of the segment that the city runs through. One impairment has been removed from an impaired body of water list.
And that would be along the Concho River?
Yes, sir.
And so aside from improving the quality of water, it's also had a financial benefit to the city because we've never been fined, and those fines can be quite expensive. Absolutely.
Those fines assessed can be up to $37,500 a day. And the fines, especially when it affects wildlife or the public, they really take that seriously, as they should. And so it's very important that this program just slowly gets stronger and stronger, so that aesthetics are more pleasing, more people want to come and kayak in the river and do lots of things outdoors and enjoy all of our efforts towards keeping that river clean.
So Shannon, you mentioned some public education outreach efforts. What are those typically?
Well, we do public programs for civic organizations, and then one I'm currently working on is with the Nature Center for their summer camps. We do education on erosion control and pollution prevention. We let them see all the equipment that the operations department uses, and I do a few experiments with them to show them the importance of not throwing trash onto the ground and not polluting their yards and the earth.
And so do you do work with school children and with schools as well?
Yes, I'm currently in the process of working with San Angelo ISD to get a curriculum program going through their science courses to encompass pollution prevention and stormwater education.
We've been talking with Shannon McMillan. She is the Stormwater Program Manager for the City of San Angelo, and we'll be back right after this. Welcome back. We are joined now by our city engineer, Russell Pell, who's here to talk about what is one of the top issues here in San Angelo, the condition of our streets. Russell, thank you for being with us.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
So let's get to this right off the bat. Let's talk about Bell Street. Where are we with the plan to rebuild Bell Street?
Well, we're currently, we've got the phase 1 plans done for Bell Street, which is from Rio Concho Drive to Harris Street. And we're working with our purchasing department to get that advertised and get our bids in, working on a front-end contract, and then once we have that all put together, then we'll put it out for bids, and should be out in the next week or two to have that out for advertisement. We'll advertise it for about a month, and then we should see construction start, mid to late fall.
So this is a project, rebuilding Bell Street, that we've anticipated tackling much earlier than this. Why has it stalled?
Well, some of the initial issues that we ran into, or that our design firm that's working for us found, was the right-of-way. What that basically means is that some of the adjacent property owners, or the people that own adjacent to Bell Street, some of their property lines actually extended out into the street, or too close to the curb to where we couldn't add a sidewalk, because part of this project is we're going to be adding a sidewalk along certain sides of Bell Street. And in order to do that, we need to have the proper right-of-way or property to be able to construct that and then have it in place after the construction's over.
If I understand correctly, then we just had to work through some agreements with those property owners in order to gain access to their property.
Right. And so, yes, we had to work with those property owners to, to negotiate, a cost to purchase that from them, so that we could obtain that right-of-way, indefinitely, or an easement to be able to just do the construction. And that just took time. It took time to find all of those owners, because not all of those owners live there. Some of them may live in another city, and then too, we also had to have all of those properties surveyed, and just working through that just takes time. And it took us approximately 5 months to work through that, and we actually have one left still that we're still negotiating with. At least we've been in contact with them. We found them. They're willing to negotiate. It's just we're in that last negotiation process. So we don't really foresee that holding up our construction, because there's a lot of work to be done, and it's only one property. So
You mentioned a little earlier that construction will begin this fall, and you also mentioned that'll be the first of 3 stages to rebuilding Bell Street. Talk about the timeline that will be involved for this first phase and then for the following stages.
Right, so this first phase, we really want to get this project kicked off. So what we're doing is we're putting out this first phase as a kickoff to get it going, because of the political pressure and just the need for it. And then then the phases 2 and 3, we're planning on having those. We're nearing completion on the design of those as well. The right-of-way issues were for the entire length of the project, so that extended into phases 2 and 3 as well. So we've gotten that cleared up as well, and we should have those designs done around late November. And what we're planning to do is to actually to group those together and put them out as a bid, or advertise them as basically as one project. They'll still be let as phases 2 and 3, but the idea with that is to hopefully, if the contractor that gets the first phase, they'll bid on those other 2 phases. We're hoping to get some better costs, to have a larger project put together, and then 2, it just simplifies it moving forward. Then that way we can pull the trigger on phases 2 and 3 if we have them together.
And so will you complete construction of phase 1 before you begin construction of phase 2, and then the same thing for phase 3?
Yeah, I mean, the idea is to have not to have the entire length of Bell Street torn up at one time. So just to minimize the inconveniences there, we're planning to break it up so that it's not all broke, the street isn't all tore up at one time and inconveniencing everyone. So we're planning on doing it in stages, so that just to minimize those effects, minimize the impact of getting home or getting to your business. We just want to be as convenient. We're trying to be as open-minded to all of those inconveniences, because there's construction going on everywhere in town, and everybody's aware of that, and we're trying to be mindful of that and to keep it as safe as possible too.
And when you talk about inconvenience, we don't want people to think that this is something that's going to happen in a flash either.
Right.
That each of these phases, if I remember correctly, is going to be 18 months worth of construction?
At least 18 months of construction. That's something too, when we put this out for bid, if the contractor sees something that we missed, we may need to renegotiate that time frame, because there is a lot involved with this Bell Street project. We have a large trunk main, water main, that runs underneath Bell Street that we're also relocating as part of this process. And there may be something that we overlooked, that a contractor might see that maybe we didn't see. And so, but we're looking at 18 months for each phase, and that includes the water and sewer infrastructure as well as the street reconstruction. And you'll notice too now that there's franchise utility companies. We've already started working with those guys to help. That was another issue that we ran into was, we saw that there was franchise utilities in that right of way, and that there were going to be conflicts. So we've been working with them already, and they're already on the ground relocating, gas mains, fiber optic lines, cable, telephone, things of that nature as well. So, that's one thing that has been nice working with our consultants, is that they've, been reaching out to those different franchise utilities to get those out of the way. So once we have a contractor redoing the road, it's a much smoother process. They don't have to wait on another utility company relocating their lines. It's already been relocated. And, the idea is to have it out of the way before we ever get started.
And so you mentioned moving water and sewer lines. So those will no longer be directly under the street. They'll be alongside the street, so that if something goes awry with those lines, you're not tearing up a brand new street in order to make a repair.
Correct. So the water line, that we are moving out from underneath the street. The sewer lines we'll continue to have those underneath the street, mainly because of those right-of-way issues. We didn't have enough right-of-way to relocate both. And a lot of times, if a water main breaks, it's going to tear everything up. The odds of a gravity sewer main tearing something up are very minimal, because it doesn't have that added pressure on it to create havoc.
So Bell Street will actually be the second project under a 10-year, $80 million plan to rebuild some of San Angelo's worst streets. The first project was reconstruction of MLK, and we've been asked a lot about why Bell Street wasn't first, but there's actually a very good reason for that.
Right. So the MLK project, the main reason it got bumped up ahead of everything else was because of grants. We received a grant for doing sidewalks and pedestrian improvements along MLK, and so we had a deadline to get that under construction, and it was actually the end of August, or August of 2016. So we really pushed hard to get that one designed and bid and put out the door. And so, we met that deadline, and so we're able to have an extra a little over $1 million of grant funding to accommodate for that pedestrian traffic in that area.
So where are we right now with the MLK project, which I should mention also includes replacing water and sewer mains?
That's right. So we've already replaced all of the water and sewer mains that are in the MLK right-of-way. So that puts us right at about 50% complete with the overall project, or of just MLK. It's going to take a little bit longer now with the streets. It's just a little bit longer process. Part of the grant, we had some restrictions as to how many blocks of street we could have blocked off, or restricting that access. That was part of that stipulation for that grant. So that's going to slow things up just a little bit. But we're looking at, the contract is through November of 2018. We've been, Reese Albert's the contractor on that project, and they've been doing a very good job for us, and they have been moving at a faster rate than that. But right now we're saying November of 2018 that project will be completed.
So along with MLK and with Bell Street, what are some of the other projects in the pipeline that are part of the plan to rebuild streets?
The next one that'll be coming up is the Southland Boulevard project there near Sam's and Lowe's, Walmart, Chick-fil-A. TxDOT's already doing a project on Sherwood Way there, and part of their project was widening FM 2288, which is basically on the north side of Sherwood Way, just north of where Southland ties into. And what we're doing in an effort to make that a safer and better transition is we're widening Southland Boulevard to accommodate for those additional movements. There's a lot of new growth going on in that area, a lot of traffic, and just in an effort to make that safer. We're also about to bid out our College Hills project. but College Hills from Loop 306 to Valley View. And that project is a mill and overlay project. And it's a newer area of town. And basically a mill and overlay is we just take off the first 2 or 3 inches of asphalt and then come back with a new asphalt.
It's like what's happening on the loop right now.
It's what's happening on the loop, exactly. And the main reason for that too is, it's a smaller project. With the $16 million that we get every 2 years, we're trying to do some big projects and then fit some smaller projects in there as well. So this is really a preventative maintenance measure as well, that it just preserves that foundation under there a little better. It seals it back up and gives it a smoother ride. So I know there's other parts of College Hills that need more attention as well, but we're that's in our next phase. We'll be hitting on those as well as in the near future. We've got Southwest Boulevard. We're finishing up the plans on those, and that's going to be in a part of our our next phase as well. But it's just having those plans ready in advance. A lot of the problems that we had, the reason why we haven't had Bell Street ready is we had got all this gigantic workload basically overnight. So we had to, that was the idea of hiring consultants. They would help us move it faster, be able to get that design. So what we did too is, not only did we get phase 1 done with, Bell Street, College Hill, Southland, but we got some of phase 2 in that money, as well, to get it designed. So that way, when we're ready to pull the trigger on that next set of bonds, we can just, put that out for advertisement and get moving on it.
You mentioned that the mill and overlay is more of a sort of a preventative a way of maintaining your streets, and that segues perfectly into what I wanted to talk about next, which is our annual seal coating that will occur this summer. This will be the 3rd year of an 8-year cycle to treat every city street in San Angelo. Explain what seal coating is and why it's important as a preventative maintenance measure.
Right, it is just a preventative maintenance. It's not a new pavement. It's not a resurfacing. It's not a resurfacing, but what it is just to come in there and seal up any minor cracks that might be there. A lot of times before we do our, put it out, we'll have our street and bridge crews go out and seal up some of the bigger cracks, and then the seal coat will come in and seal coat over that. And it's just to preserve the foundation that's underneath the existing street. We don't want to create any other issues. What our biggest problem is when it does rain around here, and I know we don't get that very often, but when it does, if we have large cracks, it gets underneath the pavement structure and then undermines the foundation of the street, and then that creates potholes and other nuisances of that effect. So what we're trying to do with that is get ahead of that and prevent that water from getting underneath the street. And it's a much more cost-effective measure, obviously, than rebuilding a street. Correct. So like our MLK project versus a seal coat project, it's literally 100 times more expensive to do that reconstruction of MLK than it is to do a seal coat. And what areas of town will you be seal coating this year? We're hitting this year the Santa Rita area and the College Hills area. And then we had some add alternate depending on how the bids came in. Some additional parts on College Hills, and then some areas, that are south of there. So I know you also have an important message for people who live in those neighborhoods that park on the street. Yes, we really ask that people, what we're going to be doing with as part of the seal coat is we're coming out notifying everyone when we'll be there. We ask that everybody try to keep their cars out of the street, because this is a maintenance activity, and there is a potential to tow vehicles, either to impound them or to relocate them. But we'll most likely be looking at the impounding measure because it is a maintenance activity that needs to happen. And if we have a bunch of squares left out, you're not maintaining the whole street. And I know that you haven't been integrally involved in the new asphalt recycler that's now resurfacing streets, but tell us what you think that's going to mean for the whole of street conditions in San Angelo. It should, that's going, the idea is to help maintain all of the streets in the city of San Angelo. So the great thing about that, the Benedetti machine, is that we can do it year-round, or almost year-round, you know, depending on the weather. You know, we're anticipating, or talking with Shane, you know, we're anticipating to get 9 to 10 months out of the year of having that machine running. And so with that, you know, we're only here for 2 or 3 weeks with seal coat, and being able to do that 9 to 10 months, you know, we should be able to maintain a lot more streets, and you know, effectively too, it'll make it a much smoother ride on all of our streets. You know, the idea is it goes in there and it goes in there and resurfaces that street, whereas a seal coat, you know, you're just going over what's there. You're not really, you know, fixing if there's any, you know, bumps or what have you in the street. So this way it's coming in there and it's smoothing out, giving it a new ride, and you know, I'm looking forward to seeing what we're able to accomplish with that.
As always, I want to remind our viewers that they can find the complete schedule of street projects on our website, costatx.us/streets. We've been talking with our city engineer, Russell Pell, and we hope you'll join us for the next episode of The City.